I need to tell you about the worst feeling in personal finance. It's not being broke. Being broke has a certain clarity to it. You know where you stand, the number is small, and at least you can see it clearly. The worst feeling is doing everything right and still feeling like you're failing. You're contributing to your 401k. You're paying your credit card in full. You're driving a used car you could have replaced 2 years ago, but didn't because you know the math. You're packing lunch 3 days a week while your coworker orders $42 of DoorDash and doesn't blink. You're doing all of it. The responsible stuff, the boring stuff, the stuff nobody posts about on Instagram because a screenshot of a 401k contribution isn't exactly content. And yet, when you open your banking app, you don't feel wealthy. You don't even feel comfortable. You see a checking account that still makes you nervous on the 28th of every month. You see a savings balance that feels painfully small compared to what the internet says you should have by now. You see friends who seem to have more than you, spend more than you, live larger than you, while you're sitting at home eating leftover chicken and rice, wondering if this is really leading somewhere or if you've been lied to. I lived in that feeling for years. That specific, nauseating space between doing the right thing and seeing the results of the right thing. I called it the financial fog. You can't see far enough ahead to know whether the path you're on actually leads anywhere good. Everything is gray. Every benchmark feels impossibly far away. You compare yourself to people who are either further along or faking it entirely, and in the moment, you genuinely can't tell which. But here's what I know now that I didn't know then. The fog is normal. The fog is actually the sign. The feeling of I'm doing this, but nothing is happening is exactly what the early stages of wealth building feel like. It's supposed to feel slow. It's supposed to feel invisible. Because wealth is built in the exact same place where it's hardest to see underneath the surface of your daily life in accounts you don't check often enough through a compounding curve that barely moves for years before it rips vertical in ways that will genuinely shock you. This video is about the 9 signs that you're building real wealth even when your brain is telling you you're not. Some of these you'll recognize immediately and feel a wave of relief. Others might reframe the way you've been thinking about your own financial life in a way that changes your relationship with money permanently. Let's get into it. You have money automatically leaving your paycheck before you see it. This is the single most reliable wealth-building behavior in America, and it's so boring that most people don't realize it's working. If you have a 401k contribution coming out of your paycheck every 2 weeks, or an automatic transfer hitting your Roth IRA or brokerage account the day after payday, you are doing the thing that 94% of millionaires did to build their wealth, according to the Ramsey Solutions National Study of Millionaires. You're paying your future self first. The Vanguard 2025 How America Saves report found that the average 401k contribution rate hit 7.7% in 2024, with the average total savings rate, including employer matches, reaching 14.2%, according to Fidelity's Q3 2025 data. If your contribution is anywhere in that range, you're already ahead of the majority of working Americans. If you're above 10%, you're in a genuinely strong position, even if your balance doesn't feel impressive yet. Here's what your brain gets wrong about this. It focuses on the balance. You check your 401k, see $1,000, and think that's nothing compared to $1 million. Your brain compares where you are to where you need to be and declares the project a failure. What your brain ignores is the behavior. The automatic contribution is the engine. The balance is just where the engine happens to be on the odometer today. The engine is what matters because the engine is what produces the destination. A person contributing 12% of a $70,000 salary is putting roughly $8,400 a year into investments. At 8% returns over 25 years, that annual contribution alone produces roughly $632,000. The $41,000 you see today is the seed. The 632,000 is the tree. You're staring at a seed and declaring it's not a tree yet. That's not failure. That's agriculture. My friend Andre checks his 401k once a quarter. He has $78,000 at 32. Every time he looks at it, he feels behind. He compares himself to people online who post six-figure portfolio screenshots at 28. What Andre doesn't calculate is that he's been contributing since he was 24. His employer matches 4%, and at his current rate, he'll cross 1 million before his 55th birthday without increasing his contribution by a single dollar. The person posting the six-figure screenshot at 28 probably received family money, sold a company, or is lying. Andre is building generational wealth on a $73,000 salary and a lunch he packs 4 days a week. He just can't see it yet because the curve is still flat. It won't be flat forever. You pay your credit card balance in full every month. If you do this, you belong to a financial minority that is quietly and systematically separating itself from the rest of America. Nearly half of all credit card holders carry a revolving balance month to month. Among millennials and Gen X, that number climbs to 53%. Total U.S. credit card debt crossed $1.28 trillion at the end of 2025, according to the New York Federal Reserve. The average balance is about $6,500 at 22.4% APR. When you pay your balance in full, you're not just avoiding interest. You're avoiding the compounding destruction that interest causes over time. A $6,500 balance at 22% paid at the minimum costs over $9,000 in interest across 18 years. That $9,000 invested instead at 8% would have grown to roughly $32,000. The true wealth difference between carrying a balance and paying in full on a single credit card is over $40,000 across a couple of decades. You probably don't feel wealthy because paying your card in full just feels like basic responsibility. It feels like the bare minimum. It's not. It's a behavior that separates you from roughly half the country. It means the compounding engine of the credit card industry is not working against you, and every month the money that would have gone to Visa or MasterCard in interest stays in your financial ecosystem instead. You're not paying someone else to use your own money. That sounds simple. 50% of American cardholders can't say the same. You know exactly how much you spend every month. This one sounds underwhelming until you realize how rare it actually is. 47% of Americans entered 2026 without any budget at all, according to YouGov data. Among those who do budget, the most common reason isn't building wealth or investing. It's making sure they can cover essentials, just surviving the month. If you track your spending even loosely, even imperfectly, even through a simple spreadsheet you update on Sunday nights while watching television, you are practicing the behavior that behavioral finance research consistently identifies as the strongest predictor of financial improvement. People who track spending save 15 to 20% more than people who don't. The act of tracking creates awareness. Awareness creates friction. Friction slows down unconscious spending. The average American underestimates their subscription costs by $133 a month. The average impulse spending runs $282 a month. If you know your numbers, you've closed those awareness gaps. The money that other people lose to invisible spending stays in your account because you can see it. You feel broke, partly because tracking makes spending visible in a way that non-trackers never experience. They spend $300 on impulse purchases and don't feel it because they never look. You spend $80 on impulse purchases and feel every single one because your spreadsheet shows it to you in black and white. The awareness that makes you feel financially anxious is the exact same awareness that is building your wealth. The discomfort is the mechanism. It's working. You drive a car you could have upgraded but chose not to. This is one of the clearest signals of wealth-building behavior in the data. The median price paid by millionaires for their most recent vehicle was $31,367, according to Thomas Stanley's National Millionaire Survey. An Experian automotive study found that 61% of households earning over $250,000 drive Hondas, Toyotas, and Fords. Only 23.5% of millionaires owned a car from the current model year. Meanwhile, the average new car payment in America hit $767 a month at the end of 2025. Many Americans carry payments over $1,000 on 84-month terms for vehicles that lose 20% of their value in the first year. If you're driving a 2019 Civic while your coworker pulls into the lot in a leased BMW, you feel behind. You look at the two cars, and your brain does a status calculation that makes you the loser. What your brain isn't calculating is the $400 to $600 monthly difference between your payment and theirs, compounding at 8% for the next 25 years. That difference is worth roughly $500,000 to $750,000 depending on the spread. Your coworker is performing wealth. You're building it. The parking lot is lying to you. Your brokerage account is telling the truth. I drove a 2017 Honda Civic for 6 years. Every single month during those 6 years, someone in my life upgraded their car, and I felt a flicker of doubt. Am I being too frugal? Am I punishing myself? Should I just get the nicer car? Then I'd check my investment account, watch the number climb by another few thousand, and remember why I was doing this. The Civic got me to work, to the grocery store, to my friend's house. It did everything a $48,000 car would have done for less than half the cost. The gap between those two prices lives in my portfolio now. It's working for me 24 hours a day, generating returns I'll use for decades. The BMW would be worth $12,000 by now. You have an emergency fund, even a small one. If you have even $1,000 set aside specifically for unexpected expenses, you are in a stronger financial position than roughly a quarter of the American population. 24% of Americans have zero emergency savings heading into 2026. The median emergency fund balance across the country is roughly $600 according to Empower data. $600. That's one car repair away from a credit card spiral. Federal Reserve survey data has consistently shown that roughly 37% of Americans say they could not cover a $400 emergency without borrowing or selling something. If your emergency fund has more than $400 in it, you have more financial resilience than over a third of the country. If it has more than $2,000, you're in a materially different position than most Americans your age. You don't feel wealthy because an emergency fund doesn't do anything visible. It just sits there. It doesn't grow fast, especially in a high-yield savings account earning 4% or so. It doesn't give you dopamine the way a new purchase does. It doesn't impress anyone at dinner. Your brain categorizes it as stagnant money, money that isn't producing results. Here's what it's actually doing. It's preventing catastrophe. It's preventing the $400 car repair from becoming a $4,000 credit card balance at 22%. It's preventing the cycle that traps millions of Americans in debt every year. The emergency fund's job isn't to grow. Its job is to protect everything else that's growing. It's a wall. You don't notice the wall until a flood comes, and then the wall is the only thing that matters. You've said no to something you could technically afford. This is the behavioral signature of wealth building, and it's the one that feels the most counterintuitive. You saw the trip to Europe, you could have charged it, you have the credit, your friends are going, you said no. Not because you couldn't pay for it, but because paying for it would have compromised something else. Your investment contributions, your emergency fund, your debt payoff timeline. That no is wealth in formation. The Ramsey Solutions Millionaire Study found that 94% of millionaires consistently lived below their means. Living below your means isn't about earning a lot. It's about spending less than you could. It's about creating the gap between what your income allows and what your lifestyle consumes. Every no widens the gap. Every gap dollar gets invested. Every invested dollar compounds. The no doesn't feel like a wealth-building action in the moment. It feels like deprivation. It feels like missing out. It feels like watching from the sidelines while everyone else lives their life. But here's what the data says about the people on the sidelines. The median net worth for Americans aged 35 to 44 is $135,600. The 75th percentile is $488,400. The difference between median and 75th percentile is $352,800, and that gap is driven almost entirely by savings rate, not income. The people in the 75th percentile said no more often. They packed their lunches, they drove the older car, they skipped the trip, they protected the gap. And $352,800 of compounded discipline is the measurable distance between those two groups. My coworker Priya turned down a $2,600 girls' trip to Tulum last year. She felt miserable about it for weeks. Her friends posted photos for 7 straight days, and every single one felt like a personal attack on her decision. Then, Priya looked at her Roth IRA balance, which had crossed $45,000, and did the math. That $2,600 invested for 20 more years at 8% would become roughly $12,100. She didn't skip a trip. She bought $12,000 of future wealth. The photos from Tulum will fade. The compounding won't. Your net worth has gone up over the past 12 months. This is the metric that cuts through all the noise, and most people never check it. Net worth is everything you own minus everything you owe. Your checking account, savings, investments, retirement accounts, and the market value of any property, minus your mortgage, car loan, student loans, credit cards, and any other debt. According to the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, the median net worth for Americans under 35 is $39,000. For 35 to 44, it's $135,600. For 45 to 54, $247,200. For 55 to 64, $364,500. These are medians. Half of Americans in each group have less than these numbers. If your net worth is anywhere near or above the median for your age, you are doing better than half the country. If it went up over the past year, even by $5,000, even by $2,000, the trajectory is positive. You're accumulating. The direction matters more than the number. I calculated my net worth at 29, and it was negative $11,400. It was terrifying, but I checked it again 6 months later, and it was negative $7,200. 6 months after that, negative $2,100, then positive $4,800, then positive $12,000. The number itself was small for years. The direction was relentless. Every time I checked, the arrow pointed up. That arrow is what wealth looks like before it looks like wealth. It's what the early part of the compounding curve feels like from the inside. Boring, slow, almost imperceptible, and completely unstoppable if you don't quit. The average net worth for all Americans is approximately $1,063,700, according to Federal Reserve data. But the median is only $192,084. That enormous gap exists because extreme wealth at the top pulls the average up dramatically. Don't compare yourself to the average. Compare yourself to the median. Compare yourself to yourself 12 months ago. If the number went up, you're building. That's the only comparison that matters. You've increased your income or your savings rate in the past 2 years. This doesn't mean you got a massive raise or doubled your contributions overnight. It means something moved. Maybe you negotiated your salary up by $3,000. Maybe you increased your 401k from 6% to 8%. Maybe you picked up a skill that made you more valuable. Maybe you cut $200 in monthly spending and redirected it to your Roth. The movement is the sign. Wealth isn't built through a single dramatic event. It's built through what the Japanese call kaizen, continuous small improvement. 1% changes repeated over time that accumulate into outcomes so large they seem impossible from the starting line. Fidelity reported that 45% of 401k participants increased their contribution rate in 2024. If you were one of them, even by a single percentage point, you've made a decision that will compound for the rest of your career. Here's the math on how small that single percentage point is and how enormous its consequences become. If you earn $70,000 and increase your 401k contribution from 6% to 7%, that's an additional $700 per year. $700. You won't feel it in your paycheck. But over 25 years at 8% returns, that single 1% increase produces roughly $52,000 additional dollars in your retirement account. From a change so small, your checking account barely registered it. Do that every year for 5 years, going from 6 to 11%, and the additional retirement wealth from those incremental increases alone approaches $300,000. The fog makes you think nothing is changing because the changes are tiny. A 1% increase doesn't feel like a wealth-building event, it feels like a rounding error. But compounding doesn't care what something feels like. It cares what something does over time. And a 1% annual increase does something extraordinary over time. It builds the gap. It widens the distance between what you earn and what you spend. It feeds the engine. Every year, the engine gets a little more fuel. Every year, the compounding curve gets a little steeper. You can't see the steepness yet because you're standing on the flat part. The flat part is where everyone gives up. The steep part is where the wealth lives. You don't panic when an unexpected expense hits. This is less about the dollar amount in your emergency fund and more about the emotional response the expense triggers. When your car needs a $600 repair, do you feel annoyed or do you feel panicked? Annoyed means you have margin. Panicked means you don't. Margin is wealth in its earliest form. It's the space between your income and your obligations that allows life to happen without financial chaos. 24% of Americans have zero margin. 46% can't cover 3 months of basic expenses according to Bankrate. If an unexpected bill hits your life and your response is frustration rather than fear, you have something that nearly half the country does not. You have stability. Stability doesn't feel like wealth, it feels like nothing, which is exactly why most people don't value it until it's gone. Ask anyone who's lived without it. Ask anyone who's spent a Tuesday night on their bathroom floor with a calculator app open, trying to figure out if they can afford to fix their car. Ask them what stability is worth. They'll tell you it's worth everything. Stability is the foundation that every other wealth-building behavior sits on top of. You can't invest consistently if a broken dishwasher sends you spiraling into credit card debt. You can't maintain your savings rate if every unexpected expense resets your progress to zero. You can't think long-term if every short-term disruption becomes a financial emergency. The person who handles a $600 car repair with a sigh and a transfer from savings is a person whose wealth-building engine runs uninterrupted. That continuity, that unbroken chain of contributions and compounding, is what produces the results that feel impossible from the flat part of the curve. Here's something I need you to understand about all 9 of these signs taken together. Because individually they feel small and collectively they represent something enormous. The median net worth for Americans aged 55 to 64 is $364,500. That's the midpoint. Half have less. Many of those people earned six-figure incomes for decades. Many of them looked wealthier than you do right now. Many of them had nicer cars, nicer apartments, nicer wardrobes, nicer vacations. They looked like they were winning. They were performing. If you are doing the 9 things on this list, even imperfectly, even inconsistently, even with balances that feel embarrassingly small, you are quietly positioning yourself to end up well above that median. Because the median is produced by people who don't automate their investments, who carry credit card balances, who don't track their spending, who finance depreciating cars, who have no emergency fund, who can't say no to a vacation they can't afford, who never check their net worth, who never increase their savings rate, and who panic every time an unexpected bill arrives. That's what produces $135,600 of net worth at 40. That's what produces the retirement crisis statistics I've talked about in other videos. You are doing the opposite of that. The fog tells you you're losing. The data tells you you're compounding. The fog is a feeling. The data is math. Trust the math. This is not financial advice. But I want to be direct with you about something. The feeling of being behind, the financial fog I described at the beginning of this video, doesn't go away on its own. It goes away when you develop a clear enough understanding of how money works over time that you can see through it. When you understand compound interest at a visceral level, you stop panicking about a $41,000 401k balance at 32 because you can see the million it becomes at 55. When you understand opportunity cost, you stop feeling deprived about driving a used car because you can see the $700,000 the gap produces. When you understand the relationship between savings rate and retirement timeline, you stop comparing yourself to people performing wealth because you can see that performance. And accumulation are opposite behaviors. That understanding has a name: financial literacy. It's the thing that clears the fog. It's the thing that makes every sign on this list make sense. Not as isolated behaviors you're doing because someone told you to, but as a coherent system that's building something real underneath the surface of your daily life. Without financial literacy, you're doing the right things without understanding why they're right. And the fog persists because you can't see the connection between today's behavior and tomorrow's outcome. With it, the fog burns off. You can see the curve. You can see where you are on it. You can see where it's going. And once you can see the curve, something changes permanently. You stop needing motivation. You stop needing reassurance. You stop comparing yourself to the least BMW in the parking lot. You just keep doing the boring things. Every month, every paycheck, every no, to a purchase that would have felt good for a day and cost you $10,000 over a decade. You keep doing them because you can finally see what they're building. The fog is lifting right now. The fact that you watched this far, the fact that you recognized yourself in 3 or 4 or 7 of these signs, means the fog is already thinner than it was 30 minutes ago. That's how it starts. Not with a dramatic breakthrough, not with a 6-figure windfall, with the slow dawning realization that you've been building something this entire time. You have been. The signs are there. The math is on your side. The curve bends for everyone who stays on it long enough. And here's the part that matters most going forward. The signs I described today are universal. They apply regardless of your age. But the specific traps that threaten those signs, the specific mistakes that knock people off the curve, are different at every stage of life. The spending patterns that derail a 26-year-old are completely different from the ones that derail a 44-year-old or a 57-year-old. Each decade carries its own financial landmines, its own version of the mistake that feels rational in the moment and costs you enormously over time. Knowing what those traps look like before you reach them is the difference between staying on the curve and getting knocked off it right before it bends. You're building wealth. The fog says otherwise. The math says you are. Don't let a trap you didn't see coming be the thing that proves the fog right.